Story 1: The Mystery of the Abandoned Forest House. Deep within a dense, shadowy forest, where sunlight barely pierces through the canopy, stands an old wooden house. Lonely and decayed, it seems frozen in time. Thick moss clings to its walls, and its roof, warped and broken, appears ready to collapse at any moment. The villagers nearby call it the house without escape. No one knows when it was built, but everyone knows the chilling tales. Once someone enters, they never return. Hashtag, 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 the beginning of the curse. Decades ago, the house belonged to a man named Dr. Lamb, who moved in with his wife and young daughter. They sought peace in the countryside, far from the bustling city. But from the first night, strange things began happening. Lamb's wife, Hoa, claimed to hear whispers in the walls, footsteps in the attic, and the faint cries of a child, though none of them ventured upstairs. Then came the fateful winter night. Blood-curdling screams echoed through the forest, sending chills down the spines of the neighbors. When they arrived, the house was locked from the inside, silent and dark. The next morning, the door was ajar, but the family had vanished without a trace. The only thing left behind was a worn-out doll lying on a bed, its glassy eyes staring blankly ahead. From that day forward, the house stood abandoned. At night, faint lights flickered in the upstairs windows, and the eerie laughter of a little girl could sometimes be heard. A fateful exploration. Over the years, rumors of the cursed house grew, luring thrill-seekers and adventurers. 5 daring friends, armed with flashlights, cameras, and a talisman for protection, decided to uncover the truth. On a full moon night, they ventured into the forest, their nerves on edge but their determination unshaken. The path to the house was overgrown with weeds and tangled roots that seemed to grab at their feet. As they approached, the air grew colder, unnaturally so. The house loomed before them, its warped door creaking as though it were breathing. When one of them, Min, touched the door, it swung open with a loud groan. A foul stench wafted out, decay and something far more sinister. They stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind them, making everyone jump. Inside, the house was in disarray. Dust coated every surface, cobwebs stretched across the ceiling. Yet there was an unsettling order to the disarray. Chairs were neatly arranged, an oil lamp sat half full on a table, and a clock hung on the wall, its hands frozen at midnight. As they moved deeper into the house, Min noticed the clock's second hand twitch. Suddenly, it began ticking backward. A low, guttural whisper filled the room. Asterisk, get out. Leave now. Asterisk, the first signs. In the kitchen, they found plates still set on the table, as if the family had just been there. A large, rusted knife lay on the counter beside deep scratches on the wooden floor. Then, faint footsteps echoed from upstairs. Who's there? One of the group called out, her voice trembling. No reply. Min shone his flashlight up the staircase, illuminating a figure. It was a woman in a white dress, her long hair obscuring her face. They rushed up, but when they reached the top, the figure was gone. The second floor had 3 rooms: a bedroom, an office, and a locked door. In the bedroom, they found a dusty journal. Its last page was smeared with what looked like dried blood. One sentence stood out, scrawled in a jagged hand. Asterisk, I tried to escape, but no one leaves this house. Asterisk, the locked room. The group decided to break into the locked room. Inside, they found dozens of portraits hanging on the walls. Each one depicted a different person, but all shared the same horrifying expression. Wide, terrified eyes and mouths frozen in silent screams. In the center of the room sat a tattered doll, its porcelain face cracked. Its hollow eyes seemed to follow them, and beneath its delicate dress, The faint outline of something pulsing could be seen, as if it were alive. A burst of laughter erupted from nowhere, high-pitched and chilling. The door slammed shut behind them, their flashlights flickered, and a deep, guttural voice resonated around the room. Asterisk, you shouldn't have come. Now you belong to me. Asterisk, the final moment. The villagers found one of the friends the next morning, lying unconscious in the forest near the house. His hair had turned white, and his eyes were wild with fear. When he finally awoke, all he could say was, "Don't let the house call your name." The house still stands in the heart of the forest, waiting for its next visitors. Will you dare to step inside? Story 2: The Curse of the Deep Forest. Hidden deep within an uncharted wilderness lies the Moonshade Forest, a sprawling expanse shrouded in shadow and mystery. Locals whisper of its curse, a place where those who enter rarely return. And if they do, they emerge broken, muttering incoherent words like, "He's watching me." Three friends, Dung, Han, and Lin, decided to challenge the legend. Adventurous and curious, they were drawn to the unknown. Dung, the leader, had discovered an ancient map in a dusty antique shop. Scribbled on the corner were the cryptic words, "Beware when the moon rises. Journey into darkness." The group set out at dawn. As they ventured deeper, the forest seemed to close in around them, swallowing the sunlight. Birds stopped singing, replaced by the eerie rustle of leaves and the crunch of dry twigs underfoot. Lin, the most cautious of the three, began to feel uneasy. "Are we sure we're on the right path?" Lin asked, her eyes darting nervously as if something unseen was watching them. Dung smiled and held up the map. "Don't worry, this map leads to an ancient temple. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to uncover the truth behind the curse." They pressed on, but the atmosphere grew heavier. The towering trees twisted unnaturally, their gnarled branches reaching like claws. A foul, rotting stench filled the air, forcing them to cover their noses. The first signs. They reached a small stream, its water eerily still. Lin crouched to splash her face but froze. Reflected in the water beside her was a pale face, its hollow black eyes staring at her. It wasn't Dung or Han. Lin screamed and stumbled back, but when she turned, there was no one there. I saw something," she gasped, trembling. "It's just your imagination," Dung reassured her. But from that moment, an invisible weight seemed to press down on them. Continuing their trek, they stumbled upon a massive tree with strange, ancient carvings etched into its bark. The markings looked like warnings. As Dung reached out to touch them, a piercing scream echoed through the forest, sending chills down their spines. The Forgotten Village. Following the map, they arrived at a clearing where the remains of an abandoned village stood. Dilapidated wooden houses leaned precariously, their roofs caved in, yet the air felt alive with a sinister presence. Han stepped into one of the houses and found an old clay bowl sitting neatly on a table. "It's strange. It's like someone was just here," she said, noticing faint footprints in the dust. From somewhere far off, the sound of a bell began to ring, slow, rhythmic, and unrelenting. The group froze, their hearts pounding. "We're not alone," Dung whispered, his voice tight with fear. They followed the sound and found a woman in white standing in the doorway of a larger house. Her back was turned to them, her long hair cascading down to her waist. "Excuse me, who are you?" Dung called out. The woman didn't respond. Slowly, she turned. What they saw wasn't a human face. Her eyes were bulbous and fish-like, her mouth stretched unnaturally wide, and her skin was as pale as wax. The chase. The woman let out a blood-curdling shriek, and the entire village seemed to come alive. Shadowy figures spilled out from the crumbling houses, their distorted forms barely human. "Run!" Dung shouted. They sprinted away, but the forest had transformed into a labyrinth. The trees seemed to shift, blocking their path. Han tripped, and as she tried to get up, a cold hand clamped onto her shoulder. Lin turned to help Han, but both of them froze as a towering figure emerged from the darkness. Its body was a mass of writhing vines, its glowing eyes piercing through the gloom. Dung swung his knife, hacking at the vines blocking their escape, but it was no use. A deep, guttural voice rumbled through the air, shaking the ground beneath them. "You do not belong here. Stay forever." The curse awakened. They finally reached the forest's edge, but only Dung made it out. When he looked back, he saw Lin and Han being dragged into the shadows by faceless hands. Their screams faded, leaving an oppressive silence. Dung stumbled back to the village, his face pale with terror. He tried to tell the locals what had happened, but no one believed him. They only shook their heads and muttered about the forest taking what it wanted. Now, every night, Dung hears whispers from the forest calling his name. In his dreams, he sees Lin and Han standing among the trees, their empty eyes staring at him, accusing him of leaving them behind. The forest still waits, its secrets hidden deep within the shadows. Story 3: The Curse of the Abandoned Village in the Deep Forest. Hidden deep within an ancient forest, where sunlight barely touches the ground, lies an abandoned village called Thatch Lin. Once a thriving settlement of isolated people, it now stands in ruins, its name shrouded in fear. Locals believe the village was cursed after a horrific event, and anyone who dares to enter never returns, or comes back forever changed. Stories of the cursed village intrigued three friends, Dung, Lan, and Hui, who were passionate about adventure and unraveling mysteries. Equipped with a map, a camera, and a few items for protection, they set out to uncover the truth, unaware they were about to step into a nightmare. The journey begins. They set off early in the morning, trekking along narrow trails that led deep into the forest. The further they went, the darker the forest grew, as if the trees themselves were conspiring to block out the sun. The cheerful sounds of birds faded, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by the crunch of dried leaves underfoot. "What does the map say, Dung?" Lan asked, her eyes darting nervously, scanning the shadows between the trees. "We're close," Dung replied, pointing at a strange symbol on the worn map. "The village is just ahead." Crossing a small stream, its water unervingly still, Lan bent down to splash her face. But as she looked into the water, she froze. Reflected beside her was the image of a child with empty white eyes, standing silently behind her. She screamed and spun around. There was nothing there. "It's just your imagination," Hui said, trying to calm her. But unease began to creep into their hearts. The village appears. After hours of walking, they came to a clearing where the remnants of an abandoned village stood. The decaying wooden houses were overgrown with vines and weeds, as if nature was trying to erase all evidence of human presence. The air was unnaturally cold, despite the daylight. They entered the village, finding signs of a life suddenly interrupted. Pots and pans still sat on stoves. Chairs were neatly arranged, but everything was coated in thick dust. In one house, they found a small notebook. Most of the writing was smudged, but one sentence was clear. "Don't listen to the calls. Don't open the door." "Calls?" Lan whispered, feeling a chill run down her spine. At that moment, a soft, high-pitched giggle echoed through the air. It was faint but persistent, weaving through the silence like a sinister melody. Signs of something unnatural. Determined to investigate, the group split up to search the village. In another house, Hui found a large mirror propped in a corner. When he shone his flashlight on it, the glass didn't reflect the room as expected. Instead, it showed a blurred image of a crowd of people gathering, their faces obscured by shadows. Suddenly, the mirror trembled, and from its depths, a skeletal hand reached out, clawing at him. Hui screamed and stumbled back as the mirror shattered into countless pieces. "We shouldn't stay here," Lan said, her voice shaking. They regrouped and found a larger house in the center of the village. Unlike the others, this one seemed to be in better condition, free from the encroaching vines. Its front door was slightly ajar, as if inviting them in. The central house. Inside, the air was heavy, and every step felt like it echoed too loudly, as if they were being watched. In the living room, they discovered an old altar adorned with clay figurines. Each figurine had a name carved beneath it. One of the names was Lan. Lan recoiled, her face pale with terror. "Why is my name here?" On the walls were hand-drawn pictures depicting horrifying scenes. Villagers kneeling around a massive well, their faces twisted in despair, hands raised as if pleading for mercy. In another drawing, a shadowy figure rose from the well, its glowing red eyes burning with malice. "That well, it's the center of the curse," Dung said, staring at the final drawing. "We need to find it." Confronting the darkness. Following the map, they reached the well hidden behind thick bushes. The stone structure was ancient, its edges crumbling with age. The well was dry, but its bottom was shrouded in darkness, and around its rim were old, dried stains that looked disturbingly like blood. Suddenly, a soft whisper emanated from the well, gentle yet haunting. Asterisk, "Help me, set me free." Asterisk. Hui, as if entranced, stepped closer. "There's someone down there," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Stop!" Dung shouted, but it was too late. A shadow erupted from the well, enveloping Hui. His body convulsed, then went still, his eyes turning completely white. Hui turned to face his friends, but the voice that spoke was not his own. Asterisk, "You've come here, and now none of you will leave." Asterisk. The curse unleashed. Dung and Lan bolted, running blindly through the forest. But the path they had taken into the village was gone. The trees seemed to close in, shifting to trap them. Shadowy figures began emerging from the houses, their steps accompanied by eerie, childlike giggles. Their faces were blank, yet their empty eyes bore into the two survivors. Lan tripped, and before Dung could pull her up, a cold, inhuman hand dragged her into the shadows. "Run!" she screamed, her voice cutting off abruptly. Dung kept running, and when he finally looked back, the village was gone. The forest was silent once more, but he could feel unseen eyes following his every step. The aftermath. Dung returned to the outside world, but no one believed his story. Every night, he dreams of Lan and Hui, standing in the village, their eyes empty and accusing, calling for him to return. And in the wind, faint giggles continue to echo, reminding him that the cursed village still waits for its next visitors.